Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox. Leaning on the Lord and anchored to the rock. Gotta stay strong, gotta stay smart. It's the end of the world, so do your part. Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox. We're shining bright and thinking outside the box. Gotta stay lean, gotta stay quick. Those Templar cyborgs are pretty slick. Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox. It's the end of the world, so do your part. Gotta stay strong, gotta stay smart. Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox.
All right. Well, this part we're going to talk about toxins and tests. Very, very important topic. Obviously, these things are very relevant to us today because we are at the end and the Genesis curse is at its maximum. On the health page, there's a testing guide and it's got a lot of recommended regular tests that, remember, right at the end there, you can see what I would recommend taking on a regular basis for monitoring your inflammation, your hormones, things like this. And it's one of those things too where you have a link where you can click on and you can order these tests at a relatively affordable rate, depending on the test, obviously. But they're relatively affordable and you can order them without a doctor. And this service is called BLT System. It's overseen by a doctor, so that's how they get around it. But they send you a requisition form, then you take that requisition to LabCorp, they just run the test for you, and then you're good to go. There are many such services. The one that I'm suggesting is the one that I use. So if you find a better one, then please let me know. But nevertheless, there's ways to get information without having to rely on your doctor if they're being stubborn. And most doctors sometimes don't play ball with, oh, why do you need homocysteine? Why do you need CRP? Why do you need a full thyroid panel? Well, because I need it. I need the data. And obviously I'm not going to rely on your one class of nutrition and optimal health to design my health outcomes and my health plan. So make sure you check that out. We also have learned to measure a lot of things and identify them over the last 100 years with testing advances. However, the relationships of all these things are still a mystery. We don't really know how life works, folks. Life is a mystery. And there are billions of chemicals and chemical reactions and all kinds of things happening every second. It's a profound concert of atoms and molecules and cells and all kinds of crazy things. So test scores for blood tests are based on population averages, so it's important to know that. And labs can sometimes change those averages and the ranges based on whatever decision that the board makes for that lab. And then your results may become irregular as a result. So that's important. Another thing is that because they're based on population averages, it doesn't mean they're based on optimal health. And we'll talk about that with some of the things, like with the thyroid tests. So it's important to understand for everything that I'm testing, what is the lab range, of course, but what is the optimal health range according to a more naturopathic, holistic understanding? Because the holistic understanding is looking at the spectrum and not at the black and white disease. We want to look at the spectrum. We want to find how close we are to optimal. Not wait until it's out of range and, oh, now you have a disease. Well, let's put some medicine on it and you'll be better. So it's very important to understand that. Some tests are also biased by politics and big pharma infiltration. For example, LDL and cholesterol numbers. Cholesterol figures, if you look in history, of course, cholesterol and fat has been very demonized in the last 50 years since the Keyes study in the 1970s and the hijacking of the American Heart Association. But the point is this, you have, if you look in like the 1800s, people's cholesterol was like 220, 250, and there were like no instances of heart attack or stroke. Now they're telling people, oh, you need to have cholesterol of like 120 or whatever else. If you're on statins, it's even lower. I mean, it's just so horrible. You need cholesterol. Cholesterol is important for the body. It helps to build your hormones. It's a very important chemical. And it's in animal products for a reason, because we need it. The problem is not cholesterol. The problem is, other things. It's inflammation, it's blood sugar, it's everything else. But nevertheless, the numbers that you see on a cholesterol test are biased because why? Why do they bias? Well, because big pharma lobbies for these things. And of course, now if you move the range over by a little bit, now suddenly everybody's sick and you can prescribe the medication. That's why. So this is the problem. And many tests, again, are not optimized for optimal health. They're optimized, they're just based on population averages. A good example with thyroid is the TSH score. TSH goes from, 0.1 to, I don't know, depending on what lab you go to, 5 usually. But if you're like a 4.8 on your TSH, that's not good at all. That means your thyroid is working really hard to produce normal level thyroid hormone, assuming your thyroid hormones are optimal. Okay, if you're assuming, because usually it's not the case if your TSH is that high, but assuming your thyroid levels are optimal, but your TSH is like 4.8 or something, that means your thyroid is working extra hard to produce the same amount of stimulation to produce those hormones. A good optimal thyroid range is between TSH is about 1 to 2, something like that. The low end of the spectrum. But you see, the spectrum is huge. And modern allopathic medicine does not have the sensitivity to recognize subclinical hypothyroidism. Subclinical would be, okay, well, we look at this range. Well, your thyroid is not above 5, so it's not diseased yet, but it's getting close to 5. What does that tell us about other things? How's your diet? How's your inflammation? Let's look at your inflammatory markers. Let's look at your homocysteine. Let's look at your gut. Let's maybe do a heavy metals test and see what kind of metals you're dealing with. What's going on here? Something is disrupting this process. That's how you need to think about health. But doctors will never do that unless you're dealing with a naturopath or somebody who's, holistic in their training. So this is the problem. Now, you can also get a genetic test, which is very valuable because nowadays you can basically just get your whole genome profiled and you can get a report like with Self-Decode. Self-Decode is the one that I recommend and use. They give you a great report, lifetime, it's like $200 for a lifetime report of a ton of different things on all the things that you have propensities, like, how you deal with saturated fat, what kind of inflammation you have, what is your thyroid, what propensities you have there. It's very, very useful. Again, if you like that data, it's useful to have as a map so you understand what you're dealing with and where are the areas that you need to tweak. It's like a map, right? You have a topographic map. You can look at that map and say, okay, this part's going to be harder because it's more altitude. I don't have to climb so much. Okay, this one's a little bit easier and so on based on the topography. Well, the genetic sequencing in the map gives you a topography of your individual genome, of your body that God has given you. So you understand, okay, maybe some dietary things I can change. What are some supplements that are going to be really good for my genetics? That kind of thing. Because every supplement has epigenetic changes. So on that topic of epigenetics, I want to show you a quick little video, which is very interesting on epigenetics. It's a rising study of these things which God has made for us to learn about and marvel at his genius.
I want to share one of the most fascinating studies on the power of epigenetics. It's called the Dutch Hunger Winter Study. In World War II, pregnant women were exposed to a devastating famine that killed tens of thousands of people. The results were shocking. The children they gave birth to had higher rates of metabolic disorders, cardiovascular disease, and even mental health issues, even though they weren't directly exposed to the famine. Here's what's incredible. The results didn't stop there. The grandchildren of those women, even though they weren't exposed to the famine at all, also showed a higher risk for similar health issues. What does this mean? It's epigenetics at work. How environmental factors like famine, trauma, and even stress can leave a mark on our genes, altering the way our genes are expressed while not changing the genetic code at all. And it's those epigenetic changes that are passed down from generation to generation. This study flips what we thought we knew about genetics. It shows that our experiences, our stress, and even the things that our parents and grandparents went through can literally reshape our biology and influence future generations. And most importantly, epigenetics shows us that we can change our family story and actually heal ourselves. Through our own choices, we can change our genetic expression. Research backs this because in a follow-up study, researchers found that the epigenetic changes of people who were in the famine weren't permanent. People who had better nutrition and healthier relationships actually showed a reversal in effects and had overall improved health. I want to share one of the most fascinating studies on the power of epigenetics. It's called the Dutch hunger.
Yeah. So epigenetics is a fascinating thing to study because epigenetics is the genetic portion of your genome that is fluctuating because it's about on or off switches, which genes are being expressed at what time. Your DNA is what is your code? What kind of code do you have? Epigenetics determines which genes are being expressed at what time. And epigenetics is a fascinating topic of study. It's very complicated, but in general, you can think of it just as like little switches that determine whether a gene is being expressed and doing its work to fold proteins or not. And so based on what genes are being expressed, those things can determine your metabolism, your propensity for disease, your inflammation, all this kind of stuff. And epigenetic changes are being caused by all kinds of things: trauma, stress, nutrition, toxins. All these things are changing which genes are being affected and what. And this is an ongoing study, but it's important to get familiar with genetics and your specific genetics and understanding what are the propensities for your particular organism. What SNPs do you have? Single nucleotide polymorphisms. In other words, what errors, right? What little mess ups do you have in your code which can affect your propensity for certain things? For example, I mentioned to you earlier that I have VDR issues. So my VDR gene, the gene that's vitamin D receptor gene, VDR, my vitamin D receptor gene has many SNPs in it, single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are basically, if you remember the thing from chemistry class or biology class with the DNA, you have a nucleotide. Polymorphism is instead of a T, it's a C. Instead of a G, it's a T or whatever, right? So those mutations are common in everybody's genome. Everybody has polymorphisms. The question is not if you have them. The question is, how significant are they? And there's constant research being done, and these services can tell you, well, your polymorphisms here are significant, they're not, and so on and so forth. I know, for example, with me, with vitamin D, there's a lot of them. So my vitamin D receptor is not so hot. It's about, I would say maybe 50, 60% as good as an ideal one, right? So what does that mean? Well, that means obviously that I need to take a lot more vitamin D because my VDR gene is just not, even if I don't have epigenetic issues that are preventing it from doing its full job, even if it's working at 100%, that 100% for me is still only 50 or 60%. Do you get it? Never mind the epigenetic things that can influence the expression and the, how it works. So I'm getting you in, let's say I get 50% of 50%. Well, that's 25%. So anyway, the point is that genetic information is very valuable, especially in this day and age with AI and everything else. You can really get an idea to help yourself customize a nutrition plan and make it really specific and understand what are some things maybe you shouldn't eat. Maybe you should eat certain things. Maybe you should take certain supplements and so on to really benefit your genome. I talk about this in my article on genetic testing, but it's helpful for understanding where you are prone to have inflammation, how your body deals with inflammation, understanding how to shape your diet through blood sugar, cholesterol, different choices there, understanding what to do with your lifestyle, whether you should have caffeine or not, substances, dopamine, exercise response, how do you respond to different factors in lifestyle, and to what extent? Are you more adapted for high intensity things, or are you going to really have joint issues or whatever else if you push, certain exercises and so on? Very valuable information. Understanding where you need more supplementation. Again, with my VDR example, and also B12. I have a ton of genes that have SNPs in them that have to do with B12 recycling. So with me, for example, if I take B12 in high amounts, I can get my blood tested, my serum B12, and it's really high. But in fact, my B12 is actually low. So it's a fake result. Why? Because the body is not processing it. So there's certain genes that have to do with recycling B12 and basically getting it into the cells. So this is where we get into another important conversation on blood. I'm kind of going, darting around a little bit, but hopefully it'll make sense. With testing, you cannot get tests for nutrition like B12, magnesium, all this stuff. You can't get blood tests for that. You can't get blood tests for those things because your blood, a very important principle you need to understand is that your blood is life, right? Blood is life. So blood is the most important thing. It needs to be perfect. Your body is trying to maintain your blood as optimal as it possibly can. At the cost of anything else, your blood needs to be as good as possible, because blood is the thing that is right now in the heat of the moment. Your blood has a specific pH. I think it's like 7.13 or somewhere around there. It's very highly specific. If it's off by 1/10, you could die. You could have serious problems. So these fluctuations of different chemicals that come into your blood that create pH changes. For example, if you drink a soda and you get all these phosphates in you and whatever, all the other acidic stuff, your body now has an acidic problem that it needs to neutralize immediately. And of course, it's very quick and it has very, efficient ways of doing that. But what it does to neutralize the acidic effect is it leaches minerals like calcium, magnesium from your body, from your teeth and your bones. And sugar does the same thing. So all these things have changes in your blood. So your blood is constantly dealing with left and right. It's the narrow road. The blood is the narrow road because it's constantly dealing with things that are assaulting it. Okay? Why is that meaningful? Because when you get a test of blood serum magnesium or, blood calcium or blood anything, blood B12, it's pointless. It's pointless because the blood volume of these things does not tell you how much is actually getting into your cells. That's the issue. And when you get a test like red blood cell levels, like red blood cell magnesium, red blood cell, that's not even that good either. Because, I'll tell you why, the red blood cells do not have a nucleus. The red blood cells are not metabolically active, like a white blood cell. They come and they go. They're like little containers. And so they're not an accurate representation of your tissues. There's only one test that I have found to be relevant to the whole body picture, and that's the SpectraCell test. In terms of testing your levels for minerals and vitamins, like B12, like vitamin D, and so on and so forth. Now, vitamin D blood test is decent. However, certain things like magnesium levels, vitamin K, the B vitamins of certain things, those are much better tested in a SpectraCell test. Now, I have a whole interview on the health page with Nicole. She was I don't know if she still is, but at the time, she was part of the SpectraCell doing their education department, and we talked a lot about the SpectraCell test. You can listen to it. It's a very nerdy interview, so if you're into that, enjoy. But SpectraCell is a phenomenally clever test. It's an old test. Actually, I think it was developed in the 80s, believe it or not. The way it works is you put a petri dish full of your white blood cells from your lab test. They draw blood and then you send them over there. And you culture these immune cells, these lymphocytes, in the petri dish. And then you eliminate one thing, the thing that you're trying to test, whether it's vitamin C or vitamin K or whatever else. And everything else is there. So the question is, if your white blood cells have a lot of vitamin C, then they're going to survive for quite a while, right? Because they have reserves. If they don't, then it doesn't matter if they have all these other nutrients, they're not going to live very long. So this is the idea, is that the proliferation of these cells and how they live and how they basically expand is an indirect way of determining relatively accurately the overall body stores of your vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Now, with everything, there's a caveat, right? First, I want to say that lymphocytes are metabolically active, so they have a nucleus, which means that the status of a lymphocyte, your immune system, because it's very important, there's been a lot of research that connects the nutritional status of lymphocytes to being a representative sample to the rest of your body. That makes sense? So for example, if I see a lymphocyte and the average of these lymphocytes shows that there's high vitamin C in the lymphocytes. Okay, well, because they're metabolically active, they have a nucleus, they're doing things in the body, their immune system, they're very important. We can assume with relative accuracy that you have vitamin C in your body. You're doing good. It's not a perfect test by any means because your body has a million ways that it distributes nutrition. And sometimes it takes from the muscles to put here, sometimes it takes from the bones to go there. It's constantly doing stuff. And there's no exact measurement that you can ever get and say, oh, this is how much vitamin C you have. Because what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Do you mean I have in my muscles, in my bones, in my teeth, in my white blood cells? What do you mean I have vitamin C? This is the problem. So we go off estimates, right? We know about 500 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams a day of whole food vitamin C is a good amount to have as part of your nutrition plan. That's what I do. I take acerola cherry powder. But, does that mean you have enough? Well, probably, but you may have surgery and your need for vitamin C may increase. Maybe you have a chronic toxin that you are exposed to that you don't even know, which is putting oxidative stress on your body. Well, you may need more vitamin C. Maybe you're pregnant. Maybe you have other things going on. I don't know. There are all kinds of things that fluctuate those needs. So a SpectraCell test is useful. I would say it's much better than a hair test. Certainly much better than a regular serum blood test. But it's also limited because eventually what you're going to do, you can take they're expensive too, like $400. You can take these tests, supplement something, and then take it again to see how that changed the stores of the nutrients. And what you'll find, which is what I found initially with the hair testing and what made me realize like this is a racket, I'm wasting my time, that something always goes down, something else changes. It's a never-ending race. Your body's constantly moving nutrients around. So in that sense, you could, in theory, take a SpectraCell test every 3 or 4 months on a supplement routine and understand and say, okay, how are my nutrient levels changing over time? Do I see patterns and so on? I don't know. It'd be very expensive. But the point is that I've done it. I've done it. Believe me, I have a whole chart with like 10 different SpectraCell tests on it. But I think what a SpectraCell test is good for, let me just say this. What a SpectraCell test is really good for is to give you some idea of the health of your immune system in an objective way, because it does measure the ability of your white blood cells to be resilient against oxidative stress. I think they do a peroxide test on your white blood cells, and they also look at the overall health of your immune system. That's really important. You want to know, because your immune system is like first line of defense. And if you have really staggering deficiencies, you'll find them in a SpectraCell test, which is really important. The problem is once you get to like more manageable levels, then, is it really an accurate picture of real-time vitamin status in your whole body? Well, what does that even mean? What does that even mean, right? Because measuring, again, you could have, your bones have to have a certain amount of calcium and your blood doesn't have to have calcium. So nutrition is apportioned to each their own. Does that make sense? Each their own. So measuring these things, they have use, but at some point they become useless. Another thing that they're important for is this, is you take a baseline, you do a supplement routine, and then you take another baseline 4 or 5 months later, depending on your budget and everything else. Once you do that, what that results in is you will see what changed. Now, in my example, if I took vitamin D, and I know that genetic issues make it to where you need to take more vitamin D because your body is not absorbing it as easily. Okay? What that shows up like in a SpectraCell test is, for example, you'll see your vitamin D levels and they'll be maybe low when you start. You'll take a pretty therapeutic dose, let's say 5,000 IUs, and then 4 months later, it barely rose like a teeny bit, or maybe even went down because you didn't have the cofactors, magnesium, boron, vitamin K, and so on. Either way, it didn't really move much. There's a genetic issue now with vitamin D. That can be pretty clear because, again, lymphocytes are metabolically active. They have a nucleus, meaning they are responding to nutrition the way your body responds because they have your genome, they have your DNA. Red blood cells don't have a nucleus. They're just little trucks. So that's really valuable. If a nutrient is very deficient and then you supplement it and 3 months, 4 months later, you took, let's say, I don't know, let's give an example. Vitamin K, let's say vitamin K. You had low vitamin K and you took, let's say, 200 micrograms of vitamin K and, after 3-4 months, it goes up to the green. It's like it increases a lot. Well, you found your dosage. And you also found that the vitamin K doesn't have any genetic issues in terms of absorption. In my case, I know my genetic issues, and the SpectraCell confirmed that. Vitamin D was slow. B12 was very slow to grow. I would take, 1 milligram a day of B12, which is therapeutic. It's a high amount, and barely move little by little. But I know that because I have genetic SNPs that are preventing that. So anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent. But if you want to get a blood test for nutrition, the SpectraCell test is the way to go. And again, that has its limitations, just like everything else. It's the best way, I think, to evaluate your genetic issues and to also come to a conclusion about what dosage is the one that you need to take for most of those nutrients. Epigenetic changes are always happening, and genetic mutations are something that everybody has. So these things are important to be educated on. Again, your DNA is what you have. Epigenetics are what is being turned on and turned off real time by the environment. And together, these two create a very dynamic situation. So in my case, I've got a lot of SNPs with my thyroid, with my B12, with my VDR, a lot of things that eventually, will cause problems if you don't address them nutritionally. My mom was non-Hashimoto's thyroid, hypothyroid since she was 30. She's been on Synthroid, which is not good. Synthroid is, obviously causes many problems as osteoporosis risk because of the interactions it has with, I think, calcium and so on. But, it is what it is. These genetic things are the code that you get. My dad also had some thyroid suppression issues. I couldn't really tell from his test, but it seemed like he had a pituitary issue because he had low thyroid hormone and a relatively low TSH, which means that the pituitary wasn't picking up the problem. Because normally if you have low thyroid hormone, your TSH will go up. If you have low hormone and low TSH, something's not clicking in your mechanisms, and your body needs to, have something going on, either with your pituitary, your toxins, nervous system, something's going on. So anyway, I have that. I have MTHFR issues that affect my methylation. Everybody has these things, and I know about them, and I've accommodated for them in my nutrition plan. If you want a guide on blood tests, see the health page. There's also an article in the book or the website on genetic testing. And there's also that recorded audio with Nicole. Gosh, was it Nicole? I forget her name. Miller, I think Nicole Miller, something like that, of SpectraCell. That's a great interview to learn more about the SpectraCell test. I don't know how much it costs now. Maybe with inflation, it's even more. It's definitely worth it to do it. I would say, twice. So you get a baseline, you take a bunch of supplements, you get another baseline, and you understand what moves and what doesn't. And based off of that, the ones that don't move, that are slow, it gives you an idea of how to craft your nutrition plan. That can be valuable if you have the money to burn. If you're a nerd like me, then you don't have to do it. But the point is this: don't waste your money on red blood cell tests. Don't waste your money on serum blood tests. They're meaningless. You're never going to find your tissue status, okay? It doesn't matter the nutrient that's going in the blood. What matters is the tissue status. That's what matters. The actual chemically active tissue vitamin that's in the tissue and the cells that's doing its thing. It's just like thyroid hormone. You could have thyroid hormone in the blood, and yet you could be hypothyroid. Why? Because there's some sort of receptor problem. Maybe you're thyroid hormone resistant for whatever reason. Maybe the receptors are damaged and your cells aren't picking up the hormone, even though it's in your blood. So there's a lot of shenanigans that can happen in the Genesis curse, but nevertheless, testing frequency should also be based on what you are monitoring and working on. For example, when I was taking iodine and trying to do all that whole thing, I was getting a full thyroid lab every 2 to 3 months. So I could compare and make a log and see what the pattern was. You don't want to wait longer than that, especially with things when you're dealing with hormone levels. When I was trying to figure out my optimal vitamin D count, I would get every few months, I would get a test. I would adjust the supplement. I would take a little more, a little less, whatever, and see what does it take for me to stay at around 70 for vitamin D. I generally monitor my inflammation and hormone levels, like thyroid, once a year at least now. I mean, I've dozens and dozens of tests. So for me, it's at the point where I'm just at a maintenance phase. In your case, you may just be starting, and so you may need to invest in a couple more tests and a little more frequency so that you get an understanding of what's going on with your body. Unfortunately, most doctors don't look for these things. So you'll have to ask for them, and some of them will fight you on it. That's why I provided that service that you can go and just get a lab requisition order for the test that you want. Whatever test you want, they're practically, most of them are on there for hormones, hormone status, all kinds of tests that you can test. They're all there, and you can get it done. Now, let's talk about Detox. Detox is a place where a lot of people waste lots of money because they don't understand basic principles of health, and they've been lied to by marketing and seductive campaigns. A couple of important points for you. Number one, your sweat glands are not the primary detox mechanism of your body. This whole idea that you can get in a sauna and you can, sweat out 20 years of mercury, it's not going to happen. Your sweat glands can detox a little bit, but they're not designed for detox. They're designed to cool you off. That's what they're designed for. Your gut health, your liver health, and your kidney health all are your primary detoxifying pathways. How you poop, how your liver is functioning, how your kidneys are functioning are all determining how you detoxify. The liver is kind of like the processing house. The gut and the kidneys are the filtration systems that get everything out. Some poisons can't be easily removed from the body, and they have to be chelated. And I will show you proof of that today. Your nutritional reserves also determine how equipped your body is to handle the offending issues, whether they're heavy metals or toxins or whatever other pesticides, whatever else. So if you have a very poor nutritional lifestyle, if you don't eat very well, then your body doesn't even have reserves to deal with the damage. At the very least, if you have good nutrition, you can deal with the damage and offset. But if you are not taking care of yourself, then the toxic environment that we're all privy to is going to devour you. So take care of yourself. Many toxins also have pairs with nutrients. They help to remove them. For example, chlorine helps to remove bromide. Bromide is a halogen, and chlorine helps to remove bromide. So when you eat salt, that's why salt is actually very healthy for you, especially if it's, like sea salt, like really healthy kind of salt. I use Redmond's real salt. It's a really good salt, by the way. Some people don't like it. It's a little gritty. I don't find it to be gritty. I think it's great. But those kinds of salts, they have studied salt, and it's not salt that's the problem. It's the processed food that's the problem. I think something like 5 grams of salt a day is actually very healthy for you. Salt is vital for life. It's very beneficial, and it helps to chelate bromide from the body. There's also other things like toxins, like, for example, fluoride and bromide are very similar to iodine because they're in the same group on the periodic table. So what do they do? Well, they replace iodine in the body. And so they gunk up all of these mechanisms, like in your thyroid, and create problems. Fluoride also can fuse to your teeth and your bones and create fluorosis. And that's a real problem because it makes things very brittle. And so boron is really good for that. Boron can help detoxify fluoride from your body. But nevertheless, this is why a comprehensive nutrition program is very useful as your foundation. You need the basic building blocks to repair the damage, and you need the various nutrients to help detoxify from all these poisons. And some of them you can't really get rid of, or some of them are very difficult to get rid of, like mercury, lead, cadmium, thallium, cesium, as you'll see in my personal chart. But they're very difficult, and that's because your body needs chelation. We're not designed to, like, the original plan didn't have cesium and thallium floating around in the atmosphere, okay, or in the food we eat, okay? It didn't. Now there is, and so now this is a very unnatural situation. The body's not designed to get rid of these things efficiently, and this is the problem because they accumulate and they do, all sorts of damage. So this is a test I want to show you. This is from Vibrant Wellness, and they have some great, very highly detailed tests. They're expensive. I don't know how much this costs now, but I think it's probably $400 for all 3 of the tests: the heavy metals, the mycotoxins, and environmental toxins. All 3 tests. This is a urine test, but you can see they test a lot of different parameters, and all these things were relatively fine. They're in the green. Of course, there's no safe level of poison, but you want them as small as possible, and so this is the minimal range. And if it's in green, it's good. So you just go through this, and you have like, let's see here. This is a mold issue where you can see ochratoxin, satratoxin, Roridin L2. All of these are very high for me. This is in 2020, by the way. This is, I think, either 2019 or 2020. Yeah. So I took this test several years ago, and my mold toxins were through the roof for some of these. Roridin L2 was 3 times the normal, or the high range, let's put it that way, because there's no normal range for these things. This is satratoxin H. You can look these up, and they're very problematic. They cause a lot of problems. They cause damage. They can lead to many serious problems. These are yellow. These are, not as aflatoxin B1. That's another terrible one. So it's like, man, where the heck am I getting all this mold? Am I just munching on, moldy sandwiches, or what's going on? So this is the problem. Now, does this have environmental toxins? I wonder if they have environment. See, they have research too that tells you basically the conclusions that they came to, where they come from. Let's see. Yeah, this is environmental toxins summary. So this is the, okay, here it is. This is diethyl I can't even pronounce that. Diethyl dithiophosphate, DEDTP. You can look into that. I have, at that point in time, I had more than about 3 times the limit of the high level. Bisphenol A, BPA, I was obviously sucking on too many plastic things, and the high limit is 10.81. Mine was 13.4. So what does that mean? That means, okay, I need to audit my habits and not be using plastics, or if I am, make sure that I'm not using liquid in those plastics as much, or not heating anything in plastic, or maybe, whatever. You have to audit yourself. With these things are useful to audit your lifestyle and your choices. Glyphosate, you can see, was yellow, is 1.10. The high range is greater than or less than 2.3. Of course, again, there's no safe limit of a poison, folks. There's no safe limit, but the question is how can you keep these things as low as possible? And that's the goal. So that's in 2019, 2020. This is a test on home air check. And you can buy these, I think, online, and they send you basically a kit, and you can test one of the rooms. Now, again, it's relatively accurate, but to do this for every room could get expensive, because it's about $300, I think, for a test. But this is what it comes out to. So this is measuring total volatile organic compound summary. This is, again, in 2020, approximately, when I was doing all these various tests. So this is normal, moderate, elevated. Mine is severe. So mine is like one little itty bitty inch from severe. The rank is 1,500 to 3,000 elevated, and then severe is anything over 3,000. So we have in the kitchen, total volatile organic compound levels is very high. And also you can see mold, same thing. You can see active, moderate. So minimal is right here. This is the active, moderate. This is a bell curve of basically, I think, what is the average of most people's homes. So our kitchen was higher than average, okay, with mold. Why is that? Who knows? There's many different reasons, but this gives you an idea. This does seem to correlate with the urine test that I took. But what does this tell you? It tells you that you are constantly under assault. Even though I was taking all those nutrients, all those vitamins for 20 years, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you still have a ton of stuff. Now, this is from December. So the last test was from January of 2020. This is from December of 2020. So a year later, after taking precautions and basically trying to do a bunch of nutrition, let's see, what did I come up with? Okay, well, you still have gliotoxin. Now you have gliotoxin, which wasn't an issue before. Now this is more than double the high limit from gliotoxin. Gliotoxin was not an issue on the first one. That one's from Aspergillus. Aflatoxin is a little better, but it's still there. Now we have another one, chitoglobson A. That one is coming up towards the high limit. That one wasn't there present before. So that was mycotoxins. Now let's see, does this also have heavy metals? Okay, heavy metals. This is heavy metals now, a year later, practically almost a year later. So heavy metals were clean. And you'll see when I took heavy metals recently through another provider, they were very worrisome. So somewhere between 2020 and 2025, I've had some heavy metal exposure. So anyway, there's environmental toxins. Now, these are different ones, you see. BPA is not there anymore. So my actions were basically good. But now I have other ones. Atrazine, mercapturate, whatever the heck that is. More than double the high limit. The high limit is 0.07. Mine was 0.17. Mono 2-ethyl 5-hydroxyethylene phthalate. So phthalates are very bad. They're very prevalent. MEHHP. The high level is 169. What is mine? 656. So this wasn't present before. This wasn't present in January, which was a year before this test. And yet a year later, I got another toxin that I didn't even account for. 4-non-ethyl phenol, whatever the name is here, nonylphenol. The high limit is 4. Where's the high limit? 4.83. And mine was 13.2, more than 3 times the amount, or 3 times the amount. So this is really bad. And of course, you still have DEP, diet, and this one actually wasn't the same. This one did not exist a year prior. So it's new. So you have new problems all the time. Glyphosate is still there, and it's much lower than it was before, so that's good. But nevertheless, it's still a little bit higher than moderate. So it's a little bit higher than in control, let's put it that way. So this is what you're dealing with, folks. You have mold, you have heavy metals, you have mycotoxins, you have all kinds of stuff. Now we're fast forwarding into, okay, here it is. And this is the doctor's, I forget what the name of the lab is, but the test is a urine heavy metals test. And this is done in 2024, fall of 2024. Now I want you to see a couple things. The lines here, again, if you're listening to this, you can watch the video, but these tests are all pretty straightforward. These lines indicate the level of the particular toxin. Now you have to remember that this is like one big line. You take all these lines and you put them on top of each other and you see how long is your line. Because there's no safe level of a poison. So the more of these you have, the worse it is. Okay? Now, the worrying thing that I saw is this, thallium. Thallium, look at thallium. It is almost to the red. Really, really bad. Thallium is an incredible poison. And it's not good to have in your body. I don't know where I got it from. I got some nickel. I got some mercury. It's in the green, but again, there's no safe level of poison. Mercury probably from tuna, probably from whatever other food contaminated thing. Some of these are low, like, lead was really low, but you'll see once you take, this is unprovoked, by the way. This is an unprovoked test. You take a regular test, and then you take a suppository of DMSA and EDTA, then you pee out for 24 hours. And then you see what was provoked and coming out of your system, because some of these things can hide. Lead right now is very low because it's unprovoked, but you'll see with the provoked test, this increases, which means the body had a release of lead. So the body is, what does that mean? That means the body is storing lead in its places, little hiding places that it can get rid of this stuff the best it can until there's some stimulus to get it out. So when you pee on an unprovoked test, you may not get a full picture of what's going on. Because although it says low lead, that doesn't mean that you have low lead. You may have lots of lead, but you may have to take a chelating agent in order to get it out and to see that. So that's why you do 2 tests. This is cesium, and it's obviously in the moderate range. It's like, why? I don't understand why. Some of these things are very unclear. Barium. Now, they do a lot of spraying in the air here, so maybe some of this stuff is from the spraying, but nevertheless, it is what it is. Now, this is the other test. This is the provoke test. So look, I want you to see what happened. Look at this. So here's lead. Look at lead. Watch lead. Boom. Look at that. You see? You see how much release there was? So my lead went from being right around here to now it's in the yellow, meaning the body is getting rid of this lead. Oh, there's a stimulus. Okay, there's a chelator. We can attach it to that. Let's get rid of it. Mobilize it. This is what happens. So you can see if I just compare these two, that some of these went up, like lead went up. Aluminum was nothing. But then when you took a chelator, there's a little release of aluminum. Some of these went down. Like for example, arsenic. If you see arsenic, the unprovoked test was already relatively low. Or actually, no, it went up. This is the unprovoked test. You see, it's relatively low. And then it went up. The one that went down was antimony. Antimony was relatively low here. And it went to nothing. So that means that we got rid of it. It didn't have a lot. But if it went up, that means, there's some stuck in your body that you need to get out. And some of these too, like cesium, look at this. Cesium stayed about the same. So that means there's some sort of constant exposure. Thallium went a little bit down to where it still is in the yellow. So that's not very encouraging. So this is the problem. This is the problem. Now, if we go to, this is now in 2025, 6 months later, after doing chelation, 2 suppositories every week, EDTA, DMSA, and doing that for 3 months. I got a prescription from my naturopathic doctor. I did that for 3 months. Now let's see, did it get rid of all my heavy metals? Let's see, let's find out. So this is, let me just set this up so that it's aligned. Okay. They have different columns in each one, but you can see, for example, the barium didn't really change. It changed from 1 to, is this, wait a minute, toxic 24-hour metals? I'm guessing this is the last one, and this is the one that was relatively, let's see, 5, 4. Yeah, okay, this has just 2. For some reason, the first one didn't have as many columns, but either way, the barium didn't really change that much. You see, it went up on a provoked test. And, these other ones like cadmium is there probably from all the dark chocolate I eat because everything's contaminated. Cesium is still the same. It went from being in the green back to in the yellow, just like it did the first 2 times. So there's some that was released, but there's a constant exposure somewhere, somehow. You have lead, same thing, lead. Look at this. Lead, again, was very low. Now look at lead on a provoked test. Boom. Bunch of release of lead. From what? I have no idea. Mercury, let's see, mercury, same thing. Mercury was right there. And then once you release it with some chelators, you have some release of mercury. Now these things are in the green, but again, when you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these in the green, your overall toxic burden is very high. It's not good. This is not good. And thallium, look at a good old thallium. I'm sucking on thallium candy or something. I don't know what's going on. But thallium is still there. So that's very worrisome, my friends. That's very worrisome because what is the conclusion from all of these tests? Well, the conclusion is that we live in a very, very toxic world. I have taken more pills consistently over the last 20 years than guaranteed 99% of the people on Earth. Guaranteed. I've been extremely, extremely consistent. I've been so consistent. I've taken tests. I've taken supplements every single day, almost every single day, with a few exceptions. And despite all of the nutrition and every discipline thing that I've done, you can see for yourself that there are things that you cannot control even with all of that nutrition. So it's very important to have good nutrition because if I didn't do those things, my body would be even in worse shape. So all of these things, they impact your hormones. They impact your glands, your digestive system, your brain. They're causing problems. Now, nothing is super high, although again, the thallium to me is like, ooh, that's very worrisome. So I have been taking liposomal glutathione ever since then to make some kind of a difference. I take selenium. I take a lot of things to help my glutathione and my general antioxidant reserves. But obviously, you can tell that is not enough to get rid of these things because these things need to be chelated. So my general procedure after experiencing all of this, because I used to think, look, as long as you take, pills and you're doing good nutrition, you're going to detox all these things. No, it's not true. It's not true. Some of these things cannot be removed from the body unless you take specific detoxifiers. So chelation helps a lot. I'm going to do that once a year. I recommend also to you as well to do them once a year. And that's basically just getting a suppository. It's not the most fun thing in the world, obviously, but that's the cheapest. It's the cheapest way to get these chelation drugs into your body and to have them in your bloodstream, and do that once a year. And the way it works, I'll explain it in just a second, but the point is this: do that, take some extra antioxidant reserves like glutathione, selenium, and everything else. Have a good nutrition plan to manage the damage that is done from these things, because they're going to be there. They're going to be there. They're going to do damage. There's a lot of things everywhere, whether it's heavy metals or mycotoxins or plastics or atrazine or diphenylphenol, whatever compound that's out there. There's always something. And all of these things cause damage. They react with the lipid membranes of your cells. They do damage. They cause oxidative stress, and they do damage, and it needs to be repaired. If you don't have basic building blocks like minerals, vitamins, enzymes, so on and so forth, then you will have a lot of problems. Now, there's this article I want to read to you about cleaning your house, which is fascinating. It's from 2018, actually, but it says cleaning your house may be as bad as smoking 20 cigarettes a day. Cleaning your house isn't exactly the same as smoking cigarettes. For example, you shouldn't be using your mouth to clean your house. However, a study recently published in the American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine claims that regularly using house cleaning products could be as bad as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Basically, the study suggests that cleaning could take your breath away, but not in a Berlin and Top Gun type of way. Researchers at University of Bergen and Haukeland University Hospital in Norway followed what happened to two common measures of lung function over time in 6,235 people who were part of the European Community Respiratory Health Survey. The first measure is the forced expiratory volume in 1 second, FEV1. Imagine yourself trying to blow out a birthday cake with 1,000 candles and then measuring the amount of air you can blow out of lungs in 1 second. The second measure is the forced vital capacity, FVC, which is the total amount of air you can blow out of your lungs after you've taken the deepest possible breath. While both of these measures tend to peak between 20 to 25 years of age and then afterwards decrease gradually with age, the study found that FEV1 and FVC decreased faster, 3.6 and 4.3 milliliters per year faster, for women who regularly cleaned their own homes than those who did not. The declines were even faster, up to 7.1 milliliters per year faster, among women who worked as cleaners compared to those who did not work as cleaners and did not regularly clean their own homes. Also, asthma was more common, 12.3% among women who cleaned their own homes or worked as cleaners, 13.7%, than those who did neither, which was 9.6%. So statistically significant, 4% more asthma cases. These declines in lung function were comparable to those seen in people with a pack-a-day cigarette smoking habit. So again, these things aren't things you should say, I'm never going to clean my house again, but there are healthy products that you can use to clean. All of these chemicals, they're not ever regulated. They're not regulated, and we're just using them left and right. They're carcinogenic. They're highly reactive. They're damaging to, cells and to membranes and things like that. And so this is the world you're living in. No matter where you look, there's always going to be a toxin, whether it's a mold toxin, an environmental toxin like cleaning products, pesticides, whatever else, or a heavy metal, whether that's contamination from food or whatever else. Heavy metals are everywhere. Chocolate, dark chocolate has cadmium in it. Now you can get organic dark chocolate. That doesn't guarantee that it doesn't have cadmium in it, because you may have gotten a spike in yours or whatever. A lot of root vegetables have a lot of problems, like beets. Beets are, even if you get them organic, I would be skeptical. But roots in general soak up a lot of, heavy metals. Brown rice has a lot of things that it soaks up, like arsenic from the pesticides that are used. That's why they say you should eat white rice. Not that you should eat a lot of white rice, but if you're going to eat rice, eat white rice. Even though people think it's not healthy, the brown rice is worse because of arsenic. So it's constantly, something to worry about. So that's why it's better to just have a good nutrition plan to accommodate for the reality that you're going to be assaulted with toxins. You're going to be assaulted. The question is, how fast can your body repair, and are you doing anything to mitigate the assault? Or are you just letting it pile up? Now, a couple of things you can do are getting some baseline tests like the ones I showed you, like urine tests, heavy metal screenings through various ways. Usually urine is the gold standard, especially if you're going to do a non-provoked test and then a provoked test. It'd be interesting. See, the original Vibrant test that I showed you from 2020, those showed very low heavy metals, but I didn't do a provoked test. You see the problem? Because probably if I had done a provoked test, some of those things would have come out. So either way, you need to do a non-provoked and a provoked to get an idea of what's in there. And after you do that, look, don't go crazy with toxin tests. That you could take those tests every single time and you would find the same thing, that there's toxins. Just like how I found, my BPA went away, but now I have like 2 other ones that I don't even know how to pronounce that are in there. So they're always going to be there. It's worrisome. It really is. And again, I have a relatively clean lifestyle. I don't eat junk. I don't use cheap plastic things to heat them up in the microwave. I don't do that kind of stuff. And yet there's always something. So the tests are useful, but even more useful is to have a basic nutrition program and to tweak your lifestyle according to what you find out. My heavy metal test showed that I have exposure to lead, cesium, and thallium. A little mercury too. So some of those things, I don't know where they're from. Lead and mercury probably from like tuna, from fish. That's pretty common. Lead, who knows? Maybe from the powders that I have, even though I get them organic. They may be contaminated to some degree. Maybe it's the hard water in Phoenix because the water in Phoenix is horrible. I don't know. It's not clear. Cesium and thallium, I have no clue. I really don't. Cesium could be in the water, but I use a reverse osmosis water filter. Maybe the cesium is in the tap water, and when I'm taking a shower, because I'm not filtering it, it's soaking into my blood somehow. Who knows? Who freaking knows, man? But either way, this is the problem. In these cases, it depends on the amount. Remember that there's no safe level of a poison. However, having zero poison is impossible for everything. It's not possible, folks. You're always going to have some sort of poison in your body. The question is, how robust is your body's resources to deal with the poison? And are you doing things to regularly chelate the poison out of you? That's what I've learned. In my case, it's obvious that there are chronic exposures to these things like thallium, cesium, lead, mercury. These are chronically there. They're there because they were there before, and they were there after I did 3 months of chelation therapy. They're still relatively there in the same concentration. So that means that I'm chronically exposed to these things. How? I have no idea. I have no freaking clue. But it doesn't matter because the action doesn't change. I'm still going to do my chelation. I'm still going to take my glutathione. I'm still going to do as much as I possibly can to give my body as many reserves as possible to deal with these things. So my focus is on maintaining my nutrition, good habits, doing all the things that I've mentioned to you, avoiding toxic ingredients and chemicals. I try to have quality food as much as I can. I'm doing the best that I can. And it is what it is. And you learn. I didn't know what I know now 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I wish I did. But nevertheless, I'm going to keep doing these things. And the more I learn, the more I will adjust. So for heavy metals, the thing to do is to have good nutrition and regular chelation. This also goes with environmental toxins like glyphosate and so on. And there's a product actually by Optimal Health that I think I have that in my gut health article. Yeah, I think I cited in my gut health. They just launched this product, I think, this year called Chemzyme. It's an interesting enzyme that supposedly breaks down. You can take on an empty stomach and it breaks down. It goes into your bloodstream and it breaks down phthalates and these microplastics and things that are destroying our bodies with estrogen and all kinds of stuff. So that's an interesting product. But in general, good nutrition will take some care of these environmental toxins. Good habits will also take care of them. With heavy metals, good nutrition is important, but you need to chelate these metals from your body because your body doesn't have efficient ways of getting rid of lead or mercury or thallium or cesium. It just doesn't. What I recommend is having a suppository, 2 of them. Get a prescription. You're going to be subscribed anyway. But prescription for 750 milligrams of EDTA, 500 milligrams of DMSA, 2 different suppositories. Get about 12 of them of each, and then do 2 per week for 3 weeks and then take a week off. So every week you do like Monday, you do one, and then Friday you do another one, give or take. You can choose your own days. You do that for 3 weeks and then 1 week off. Then you do another 3 weeks, then 1 week off. Then another 3 weeks and 1 week off. Then another 3 weeks and 1 week off. So you do 4 sets of those. And you do that once a year. Meanwhile, keep the nutrition high, keep the glutathione going, keep the healthy habits, and so on. And, you know, the suppositories shouldn't be too expensive. They're about, I think, $10 to $15 per suppository. So it might be even cheaper than that because I paid for I think 20 of them or 24 of them. I had like $150. So it might be even cheaper than that. So it depends where you live, I guess, but it's not that expensive compared to, for example, going and getting an IV or something like that. You could take these as drugs. I think it's better to do them suppositories because they get right into the bloodstream. Whereas with drugs, you're dealing with digestive stuff and it may have to conflict. You have to take it apart from food and it can get complicated. But either way, these drugs are very research proven. They're very good for chelating metals from the body. That's what they're designed to do. So do that once a year. I would suggest it for anybody because I don't think my results are that unique. I think what I saw also would be very valid for anybody else because these things are everywhere, unfortunately. Now, if you have mold toxins, mold can be really difficult, especially if you have responded negatively to it and you have a mold allergy or serious issues with it. If you have a severe mold issue, your system overall is very burdened and you need to detoxify a lot. And sometimes even the detoxifying might create a Herx reaction and you might overdo it and it'd be too much. So sometimes it requires a specialist that might need to help you. But nevertheless, testing your environment, auditing your practices, especially in the kitchen where you spend a lot of time, that's important. Mold spores are everywhere. I used to grow oyster mushrooms and I like all the science stuff behind it, but you have to be super careful about where you are inoculating your jars because mold spores are invisible and they're just float in there and they'll contaminate the whole thing. So yeah, mold spores are everywhere. And they cause damage to your cells. These toxins like aflatoxin and gliotoxin, these things are very toxic. And they're everywhere. They're in the air. They're in rotten food. They're in processed food. Like, if you buy a bag of pistachios or something, who knows how old those pistachios are and if they've got mold or mold toxins in them and you're eating them and you're taking those things in. So these things are everywhere. Coffee is notorious for mold and mold toxins. Because of the way it's made. And so you need a strong immune system. You need to boost your immune system, and that comes with having a nutrition plan. You need to have a healthy gut so you can detoxify these things. You need to also maybe incorporate boron. You think you should incorporate boron anyway, but boron, as it is itself, is antifungal. And especially if you take it on an empty stomach, it mixes with hydrochloric acid to create a compound that is very antifungal. So it also helps chelate fluoride from the body as well. So boron is very useful. Again, with heavy metals, it's chelating. With environmental toxins, it's really just lifestyle. A lot of it is learning to drink water from a purified source, minimize plastic containers, or use them just for dry materials. Some of these things are unavoidable, like pesticides. Even if you're buying organic, it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed, but it's a much lower risk. And for that, I recommend the EWG, not to be confused with EGW, Ellen White. EWG is a organization that rates the propensity for pesticides in a particular food. And they publish 2 lists every year, the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. If your food is on the Clean 15, it's probably fine to get just a regular. You don't have to spend organic on kiwis, for example, or cabbage. But if you're getting strawberries or peaches, you should always get organic. Strawberries are probably, I think, the most toxic. It's sad because strawberries are delicious, but strawberries are so toxic if you don't get them organic. They are full of pesticides, and you're just chomping down on basically glyphosate berries. So that's the thing. And you use the EWG Clean 15 Dirty Dozen sheet to understand when to buy organic. That's going to minimize the pesticides and obviously good lifestyle habits alongside having glass containers, doing the best you can, obviously. Auditing your personal care products. Some of these things can have really nasty things in them. Get as natural as possible with everything that you do. I'm going to be offering a natural deodorant on the store by Lauricidin. Lauricidin is a compound, we'll talk about it in the gut health section, but lauricidin is a compound that's isolated from coconut oil. It's a very interesting compound. It's a fatty acid that is it monolaurin? Yeah, monolaurin is basically the type of fatty acid that's isolated. And they call it lauricidin, but it's got antimicrobial aspects. It can modulate the immune system. It's very interesting. And they've made a deodorant from it, a relatively natural deodorant. So I'm going to be selling that. But you need to have natural things, natural products, glass containers as much as you can, organic when you can. These types of things will help you avoid environmental toxins. Obviously, pollution is also another thing to watch for, and just not be inhaling poor quality air and so on. Having an air filter in your home. These types of things will all help you do overall good. Doesn't mean you're going to prevent everything. You're going to have a toxic load no matter what. But they're going to reduce the toxic load, and along with everything else that we've covered, it's going to help you manage these things much better. Now, a good tool to use with all of this is AI. AI in health testing is very, very cool, especially in this day and age, because you can just basically plug in your information and you can leverage it to interpret the data for you. And you can ask it through a prompt to think like a top naturopathic doctor or a top specialist in the thyroid or whatever else, and say, hey, based on these things, what trends do you see? Here's what I'm doing with my nutrition plan. What do you think I should tweak? And it's very, very interesting what you get back. And especially with conversation, and you can ask them to cite resources and studies, you can get a lot out of these situations. So it can be very useful. I had a recent gut test that I plugged into ChatGPT. I told you the one that I, 2 months ago, when I took the stool test and realized that I had very dysbiosis in my gut. So I went to ChatGPT, I plugged it all in, said, here's my stats, here's what I'm doing, what do you think? Oh yeah, it's classic dysbiosis. You need to do this, and okay, I knew that part, but now I have at least some confirmation and also a battle plan and so on and so forth. So AI can help to structure your investigation. It can help to organize your method in dealing with all of this new information, whether it's genetic tests, health testing, supplement things, all these things. You can deal with all that information in a more effective way by having a conversation with AI. I think it's a very valuable tool for tests. And quite frankly, to be quite honest with you, I think in many ways it's going to reduce the burden on doctors. Again, when I talked to this AI about the whole Guy Abraham iodine research, I learned more in my 45 minutes of talking to ChatGPT on this. And of course, I could speak the lingo. So we're having a pretty advanced conversation. But nevertheless, the conversation I had was more productive in 45 minutes with ChatGPT than with all of the other doctors beforehand that I've ever had. I spent hundreds of dollars on multiple naturopaths. They were all trained in iodine, and none of them could really give me a solid answer as to why I was experiencing what I was experiencing. And ChatGPT, through good prompting and good questioning, I was able to understand my issues. And my issues were very nuanced and very, tricky, obviously, but nevertheless, it really helps. So AI can be a very valuable tool. Give it the context of your lifestyle, your general eating habits, the supplements you're taking, where you live. The more detail you give it, the better you can have a response and understand the situation at hand. And I think that is a very useful tool. Because let's face it, it's hard to find good doctors. I'm not saying you should replace your doctor with AI. Maybe eventually you can, but the point is, I'm just saying leverage this tool alongside with all the other information that you have to make informed decisions, to make good decisions and to dance your way through life, so to speak, right? So conclusion, toxins are never going away. It's only going to get worse, unfortunately. This is part of the Genesis curse, but thank God that the world is not going to be around that much longer. Thank God. I hope in the resurrection. I hope for a perfect body. I hope for Jesus to return in my lifetime so that I can just live. Of course, I don't know if I'm going to live or not, but the point is, that's my hope. My hope is in the resurrection. When all of these things will just be just a distant thing of the past that we barely remember it, if at all. Most of these things are because of human greed and unchecked sin. just human ambition and greed that has totally destroyed everything. Many of them cannot also be avoided, like heavy metal toxicity or microplastics or environmental toxins or pesticides. And of course, the stress of tracking every stupid thing all the time is a stress in and of itself. That's why I said these tests are valuable, but they're not something to get anal about and do them all the time. In fact, as of my experience, I don't even think you need to even take a heavy metals test, to be honest with you. I think you just need to do the chelation every once a year, do a nutrition plan, get some extra glutathione, liposomal, these types of things. Do what I'm doing. You don't need the test. I can guarantee you that you have lots of heavy metals in your body and lots of toxins, lots of mold toxins. So save yourself the $1,000 that I spent on all of these tests, probably more, a lot more actually, and just do what you need to do and find a doctor that can give you the prescription for the suppositories. Get together a mineral and vitamin plan, get some additional support like glutathione, and just do that and just take care of yourself because you cannot avoid these things. The key is good habits, good nutrition, and having a regular detox plan. Part of that plan is improving your gut health and your liver health. Your overall health helps you to detoxify. And another part is to do some sort of chelation therapy to prevent over buildup over time. Because you don't know, there's so many fluctuating changes all the time. You just don't know what is coming into your body. You don't. You don't have like a sensor on your body that tells you, oh, by the way, you just ate tuna that has, 20 parts per million mercury in it, and now you're going to have this and that. You don't. We don't have that. So we have to just be preventative all the way. Now, part 5, oral health is next.
Healthy